The night was still, almost impossibly so. The silvered moon hung low over the kingdom, casting pale light across the cobbled stones of the ancient square. Shadows clung to every corner as if the world itself were holding its breath. Ira walked slowly toward the line of strangers gathered beneath the moonlight. Her heart pounded in her chest, a rhythm that seemed louder than the whispers of the other candidates. She did not know why she had come. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the strange pull she had felt for weeks upon that had drawn her here, to the forbidden ceremony where the Alpha King chose his mates. She had heard stories all her life, tales of power, of fear, of kings whose will was law and whose word could make or break destinies. And yet, standing among the nobles and warriors, she felt both small and significant, as if the moon itself had chosen her for some unknown reason. The line stretched long and silent. Ira could hear the soft rustle of silk, the clinking of armor, the faint murmurs of nerves in the night air. Her eyes drifted over the others, a young noblewoman adjusting her gown, a warrior with a blade glinting in the moonlight, and a few masked figures whose faces were hidden, their intentions unreadable. None of them seemed aware of her, a simple human standing apart, blending into the shadows. And then he appeared. Kale, the Alpha King, moved with a silence that seemed unnatural. His presence commanded the night itself. The shadows seemed to part as he walked, the moonlight striking him in such a way that he looked less a man and more a figure carved from legend. His eyes, sharp and dark as onyx, swept over the line, appraising each person as if reading the very essence of their souls. When his gaze reached Ira, something shifted in the air. Her breath caught in her throat. The world narrowed until it was only her and him. His eyes lingered longer than anyone else's had dared, and then, almost imperceptibly, he leaned forward and inhaled. The word that followed was soft, yet it carried a weight that pressed against her heart. Mate. Ira froze. The word echoed through her like a bell in a still valley, resonating deep in her bones. She had never expected it, had never imagined that the Alpha King would speak to her. A stranger, a human, without noble blood or armor. Yet the sound of it, the way it left his lips, was both terrifying and intoxicating. Her mind raced. Was this real? Was this some cruel test? Or had fate truly drawn her to this moment? She glanced down, uncertain, only to find her hand trembling slightly. When she looked back up, Kale's eyes had not moved. They were still on her, dark, unreadable, as though he were searching for something in her that even she had not known existed. The ceremony continued around them, the other candidates stepping forward one by one, but Ira felt suspended outside of time. Every movement, every whispered word of the priests, every flicker of the torchlight seemed distant. All she could feel was the pull of Kale's gaze, the strange warmth that had settled in her chest, despite the chill of the night. Then, just as she began to gather herself, she felt it, a subtle vibration beneath her skin, as if the moonlight itself were responding to her presence. Her eyes widened. A faint mark, almost invisible in the moon's glow, appeared on her wrist. It was a sigil, intricate and elegant, matching the emblem she had seen in the Alpha King's private chambers during fleeting glimpses in her dreams. Her heart skipped. Could it be possible? Could she truly be connected to him in ways that went beyond the physical? The air seemed to thrum with energy, a living pulse that tied her to Kale's very essence. The other candidates were nothing more than shadows now, distant figures in a world that had contracted to a single, impossible moment. Kale took a slow step forward, and with it, the shadows around him deepened. He stopped just a few feet away, his expression unreadable, though the intensity in his eyes left no room for doubt. He knew her, or at least he knew the part of her that even she had not understood. "You are not like the others," he said, his voice low, carrying across the silent square like a spell. "You feel it, do you not? The pull, the bond." Ira nodded, though her voice seemed to have vanished entirely. She had felt it, yes, the strange energy that hummed through her veins, the sense that something ancient and powerful was awakening inside her. She had felt it long before she had ever set foot in this kingdom, long before she had known his name. Kale's gaze softened, though only slightly, as he reached out a hand, not touching but hovering near her. "Then you understand. This is not mere chance. The night has chosen us. The bond has chosen us. You cannot run from it, and neither can I." Right. Ira swallowed hard. Fear and wonder collided inside her, twisting her thoughts into knots she could not untangle. She wanted to step back, to escape the weight of destiny that pressed upon her chest. Yet another part of her that had been waiting for this moment all her life, longed to step forward and embrace it. A whisper of wind moved through the square, carrying with it the scent of night-blooming flowers and something darker, older, almost metallic. The torches flickered, casting Cale's shadow long and imposing across the stones. In that shadow, Ira thought she saw movement figures watching from the edges, their faces hidden, their intentions unknown. The priest overseeing the ceremony stepped forward, raising his hands. "The Alpha King has spoken," he intoned. "The bond has begun. The mate has been chosen." Gasps ran through the line. Some candidates looked relieved, others furious. But Ira felt none of those emotions. She felt a strange, unsteady certainty. She had been chosen, yes, but in being chosen, she had also been given a task she could not yet comprehend. The night itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to act, to step forward into the unknown. Cale extended his hand fully now, inviting, commanding, not with force, but with inevitability. Ira hesitated only a moment before letting her hand brush against his. The contact was electric, a surge of warmth and energy that coursed through her body and left her dizzy. The sigil on her wrist glowed faintly, matching a hidden mark on Cale's own arm, though she could not see it. The connection was undeniable, binding, ancient. "You feel it," he said, almost in a whisper, though it carried across the square. "The night, the bond, the pull of the old magic. We are tethered now, whether you wish it or not." Ira nodded again, words failing her. She did not yet know what being tethered to the Alpha King truly meant. She did not yet know whether it was a blessing or a curse. But deep in her heart, a quiet thrill stirred. Destiny was no longer a distant tale whispered in her dreams. It was here, alive and breathing with Cale beside her. The ceremony ended in a hush, the line dispersing, leaving Ira and Cale alone beneath the moon. Around them, the kingdom seemed to hold its breath, the world pausing to witness the first moments of a bond that would shake kingdoms and awaken ancient forces. Cale studied her, his expression unreadable once more. "The night is not over," he said softly, "and neither is what awaits us. You must be ready. Darkness stirs, and it will not wait for us to be prepared." Ira's pulse quickened. She wanted to ask him what he meant, but she found herself silent, sensing that words would not capture the weight of what had just begun. Instead, she nodded, letting the energy of the night and the pull of the bond settle within her as she turned to leave. The shadows around the square seemed to shift, curling and twisting like living tendrils. Ira paused, a shiver running down her spine. She had stepped into a world of power, of kings, of curses, and of the supernatural, and there was no turning back. The moonlight bathed her path, but somewhere beyond, eyes watched as eyes watched, waiting for the moment to strike. Ira took a deep breath and stepped forward, hands still tingling from Cale's touch. She did not know what awaited her, but she knew that her life, her very soul, had been changed in an instant. And as the wind whispered through the square, carrying the scent of magic and danger, she realized one thing with absolute clarity. This was only the beginning. The castle was quiet, but not empty. Shadows lingered in corners where torchlight dared not reach, and whispers of ancient spirits seemed to float along the stone walls. Ira followed Cale through the corridors, each step echoing softly. Despite the warmth of the torches, a chill ran along her spine. This place was alive with magic, old and potent. Every corner seemed to watch her. Cale moved ahead with ease, as though the castle itself knew his presence and parted for him. He did not speak, but Ira could feel his attention, steady and unwavering, like a current pulling her forward. Her hand brushed against the banister, and a faint tingle ran through her fingers. The sigil on her wrist pulsed softly, in rhythm with her heartbeat. as if aware of the bond she shared with Kale. Finally, they entered a large chamber high in the castle, the moonlight spilling across a polished floor. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting like living things. Kale turned to her, his expression unreadable. Yet his eyes held a flicker of something she could not name: vulnerability. Perhaps, or a quiet longing. "You are stronger than you know," he said, his voice low, carrying a weight that made her chest tighten. "The bond we share. It awakens powers you may not yet understand." Ira frowned, uncertainty clouding her thoughts. "Powers? I don't understand. I'm just me, a human. How could I have powers like yours?" Kale took a step closer, the shadows around him deepening. "You are not just human, Ira. Something ancient runs through your blood. Something that has waited for this moment. The sigil you carry. It is not mere decoration. It is a mark of destiny, of connection, of choice." Ira stared at him, her mind struggling to catch up. Choice, destiny? She had spent her life trying to survive, never imagining that she would stand beside a king bound by forces she could barely comprehend. Fear and awe warred inside her, each heartbeat echoing louder than the last. Kale extended his hand again, not in command, but as an offer. "Come, I will show you what the bond means and what lies ahead. You cannot hide from it, and you should not try." Her hand trembled as she reached out to him. The moment their fingers touched, warmth flooded through her, spreading from her wrist across her arm and into her chest. The sigil flared faintly, and the room seemed to shimmer, the shadows bending as if they recognized her as part of something far greater than herself. "Do you feel it?" Kale asked, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "The connection? The pull?" Ira nodded, swallowing hard. I think I do, but it's strange and frightening." Kale's gaze softened, and he let go of her hand, though his attention never wavered. Strange and frightening is often the beginning of truth. The bond is not just about power or choice. It is about understanding, trust, and courage. You must face what you are capable of, or the bond may consume you. He led her to a corner of the chamber where a faint glow emanated from the floor. A small circle of silver light hovered above the stone, filled with symbols she had never seen but somehow recognized deep within her memory. Kale knelt beside it, placing a hand gently over one symbol. It responded to his touch, shimmering brighter. "Place your hand here," he instructed. "Do not fear it. Let it guide you." Ira hesitated, her fingers hovering above the glowing circle. Her instincts screamed caution, but a part of her she had never known urged her forward. Taking a deep breath, she placed her hand on the symbol. The moment her skin touched the glow, a wave of warmth and energy coursed through her body. Images flashed before her eyes: shadowed forests, ancient battles, kings and queens long dead, and a strange, endless connection to Kale himself. She gasped, drawing back slightly, but Kale's hand rested on hers, steadying her. "You see now?" he said quietly. "The bond is not just between us. It reaches beyond time, beyond our understanding. Your power, my power. Together, we can shape what comes." Ira's mind whirled with the visions and the weight of what she had just felt. I don't know if I can," she whispered, fear threading through her voice. Kale's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with the intensity of someone who had carried centuries of expectation and pain. "You can. You must. Fear is natural, but it cannot control you. The bond chooses strength, not hesitation. I will not force you, but you will not walk away." For a long moment, they remained like that, hands connected, energy humming through the room. The shadows seemed to pulse around them, waiting, watching. Ira felt a surge of understanding. The bond was not a chain, not a prison. It was a guide, a challenge, a reflection of what she could become. Then suddenly, the air shifted. A cold breeze swept through the chamber, extinguishing some of the torches. The shadows twisted, more than mere absence of light, and a distant, low whisper echoed off the stone walls. Ira's pulse quickened. Kale stiffened, his hand tightening around hers. "You are not alone here," he said, his voice sharp. "There are those who would see this bond broken, who would take what is not theirs. The night is full of watchers, and one has found us." Before Ira could respond, a flicker of movement appeared in the shadows of figure, swift and silent, watching from the edge of the chamber. Ira's heart raced, but Cale did not falter. He stepped slightly in front of her, a protective presence that seemed to draw the shadows toward him, not away. "You must learn quickly," he said, his eyes never leaving the figure. "The bond will protect us, but only if you are ready to embrace it. Stand close, and do not fear what comes." Ira nodded, swallowing the panic that threatened to rise. The power she had felt in the sigil, the pull of the bond, now felt like a shield she could lean on. Yet the tension in the room reminded her that this was only the beginning. Danger lurked nearby. She had no choice but to trust Cale herself. The shadowed figure shifted again, moving closer, and Cale's expression hardened. He raised a hand, and the air around them shimmered with energy, the very space between them bending. Ira could feel it in her bones, the connection not only to Cale, but to the magic that surrounded them. The figure stepped forward, revealing itself fully, a messenger from a rival clan, their eyes glinting with intent. They spoke, voice soft, but filled with command. "The mate of the Alpha King is not safe. Leave now, or face what you cannot survive." Ira's stomach tightened, but Cale's grip on her hand remained steady, grounding her. "We will not leave," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a king and the intimacy of someone speaking only to her. "This bond cannot be broken by threats or fear. You understand that, do you not?" Ira nodded, drawing courage from him and from the strange, powerful energy that pulsed through her veins. I understand," she said, her voice firmer than she had expected. "I will face it." Cale's eyes softened again, just for a moment, and then sharpened as he addressed the intruder. "Know this," he said, voice low and dangerous. "The bond of mate and alpha cannot be undone. You would do well to leave before you find yourself consumed by forces you cannot control." The messenger's gaze lingered, calculating before finally retreating into the shadows. The tension did not lift immediately. The castle remained alive with whispers and faint movements, as if the walls themselves were aware of the fragile moment of peace. Cale released her hand, stepping closer, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "The threat is not gone," he said, voice soft. "But you faced it, and you stood with me. That is the first test. More will come, and you must be ready. The bond will guide you, but it cannot fight for you." Ira nodded again, a mixture of fear and determination settling in her chest. The night had changed her, bound her to Cale, and awakened a power she could barely comprehend. She realized that her life, as she had known it, was over. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous, filled with shadows, but also filled with possibilities she had never imagined. Cale studied her, the moonlight catching the contours of his face. "Rest now," he said quietly, "but know this. The world beyond these walls will not wait. The bond is chosen, and our destinies are now entwined. Tomorrow, the true journey begins." Ira sat quietly, feeling the energy of the bond still pulsing through her, the lingering warmth of Cale's presence, and the silent promise that they would face whatever came together. Outside, the castle seemed to breathe, the shadows shifting, waiting, as if aware that a new chapter had begun. And in the quiet of the moonlit chamber, Ira realized one undeniable truth. Nothing would ever be the same again. The castle slept under the watchful moon, but Ira did not. She lay on the hard stone floor of her chamber, her mind restless, the warmth of Cale's hand still lingering in her memory. The sigil on her wrist pulsed softly, like a heartbeat of its own, and she could feel the bond between them deepening even in the silence. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Cale's dark gaze, steady and demanding, yet filled with something she could not name care, maybe, or an unspoken promise. A sudden chill brushed against her neck, and she sat upright, senses alert. Shadows shifted unnaturally in the corner of the room. Ira's pulse quickened. She had faced a threat before, but this felt closer, more personal, as if the castle itself were warning her. Then she saw it. A figure, cloaked in darkness, moving silently across the floor. Not a shadow, but a being. A messenger from a rival clan or worse. Fear and determination battled inside her, but she could not flee. Not when the bond with Cale had awakened something inside her, something that demanded courage. Before she could react, Cale appeared, stepping through the doorway as if he had been watching all along. The air seemed to bend around him, shadows clinging to his form like loyal servants. His presence was commanding. Yet there was a quiet reassurance in the way he moved toward her. "You sensed it," he said softly, his voice a low rumble in the silence. "The threat is here, but you are not alone." Ira nodded, swallowing the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Cale extended his hand, not just in protection, but in guidance. "Focus on the bond. Let it guide you. The shadows respond to us, but only if we move as one." Her heart raced as she placed her hand in his. The sigil flared bright, bathing the room in a pale silver light. The shadowed intruder froze, sensing the surge of energy, but Cale's eyes never left hers. Together they drew power from the bond, a force neither fully understood, yet instinctively trusted. The figure lunged, and the castle seemed to respond. Shadows rose like walls, forming barriers that twisted and turned with the movements of Cale and Ira. Their connection pulsed stronger, flowing through her, guiding her movements, as if the sigil itself had a mind. She felt her fear dissolve into clarity, each step, each breath aligning with Cale's own rhythm. The intruder faltered, realizing that this was no ordinary human. Ira could feel the strength surging through her, a blend of her own will and the bond's ancient power. With a silent command from Cale, the shadows shifted, casing the intruder in darkness, holding them at bay. Ira gasped, both from the exertion and from the thrill of what she had accomplished. The bond was more than protection. It was awakening a part of her she had never known. Cale's hand remained steady in hers, his gaze unwavering, yet there was pride there. Soft, but undeniable. The intruder disappeared into the night, retreating with the knowledge that the Alpha King's mate was not to be trifled with. Ira sagged against Cale, exhausted, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. "You did well," Cale said, voice low and almost gentle. "Most would have panicked, but you embraced it. The bond grows stronger because of you." Ira's cheeks flushed, both from the thrill of power and from the closeness of Cale. "I don't know if I can control it fully," she admitted. "It feels alive." Cale's expression softened. "It is alive. The bond is not a chain, Ira, but a mirror. It reflects who we are and who we can become. Fear is natural, but it cannot command us. Courage and choice define the bond, not fear." She looked into his eyes, and for a moment all the shadows and danger faded. She saw not just power, but the weight he carried, the centuries of curses, of battles, of a kingdom waiting on his strength. And yet, in that moment, she also saw him as a man, not a legend. Vulnerable, capable, longing for something he thought he could never have. Cale reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and the gesture was simple. Yet it carried a depth that made her heart flutter. "We will face more than shadows," he said. "The rival clans, the spirits of the past, the darkness that lurks beyond the walls. All will test us, but we face it together. That is what the bond demands." Ira nodded, understanding more clearly than ever that her life had changed irrevocably. "I will face it," she said, voice firmer now. "I will not run." Cale's eyes darkened, a storm behind their depths, and he took a step closer. "Good. But know this. The bond does not just protect. It challenges. It reveals truths you may not wish to see. Are you ready to see the truth of what you are capable of?" Ira swallowed hard, but she nodded. "I am ready," he smiled faintly, a shadow of warmth crossing his otherwise commanding expression. "Then we begin." He led her to the central chamber, where the light of the moon pooled across an ancient altar. The air hummed with energy, thick and almost tangible. Symbols carved into the stone glowed faintly, as if responding to their presence. Kale gestured for her to step forward. "Place your hands here," he instructed. "Do not fear it. Let the bond guide you." Ira hesitated, then placed her palms on the stone. Immediately, energy surged through her, more intense than before. She gasped, staggering slightly, but Kale's hand steadied her. "Focus," he murmured. "Do not resist it." Visions flooded her mind. Ancient kings and queens, battles fought long ago, and the spirits of those bound by the same curse that haunted Kale's bloodline. She saw herself in the midst of these scenes, not as an observer, but as a force of her own making, connected to Kale, to the land, to the magic that had slept for centuries. "It is overwhelming," she whispered. Kale nodded. That is why the bond chooses carefully. You are stronger than you think. Stronger than most could ever hope to be." Ira took a deep breath, grounding herself in the present. She could feel Kale beside her, steady and unwavering, and the fear that had gripped her began to fade. She drew on the power of the bond, letting it flow through her, guiding her thoughts and actions. The visions calmed, and the energy within her settled into a steady, pulsing rhythm. "You are ready," Kale said quietly, "but the night is far from over. There are forces that will seek to test you, to break what has begun. You must trust yourself, and trust me." Ira nodded, feeling a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had survived the first real test, had touched a power she had never imagined, and had stood beside Kale as equals in strength and resolve. The bond had protected her, guided her, and revealed a part of herself she had never known. The moonlight shifted, casting long shadows across the chamber, and Ira sensed movement beyond the walls. She knew instinctively that the next challenge was approaching, a force even greater than the shadows that had already tested her. Kale's hand brushed hers once more, and the touch carried reassurance and unspoken promises. "We face it together," he said. "Whatever comes, we do not face it alone." Ira drew courage from his words, feeling the bond strengthen between them. The castle seemed to pulse with life, alive, with the anticipation of what was to come. She realized that she was no longer just a stranger in the moonlit line. She was a part of something ancient, something powerful, something beautiful. As the night deepened, the castle grew quieter, but Ira knew that the peace was temporary. The shadows beyond the walls were moving, plotting, and waiting. And she understood that the bond with Kale was not just about protection or power, it was about choice, courage, and the strength to face the darkness together. She looked at Kale, and for the first time, she saw not just a king, not just a legend, but a man who had been waiting for someone like her, and she understood, with a clarity that made her heart pound, that she had been chosen for a reason far greater than she could yet comprehend. The moon hung high above, silver and eternal, casting light on the beginning of a story that would change both of their lives forever. And in the quiet of the castle, with shadows shifting and magic thrumming in the air, Ira knew one undeniable truth. The bond had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The first light of dawn had yet to touch the kingdom, and the castle lay shrouded in a heavy silver mist. Ira stood beside Kale on the highest balcony, the wind tugging at her hair, her heart thrumming with both fear and anticipation. From this height, she could see the faint movement of the approaching army shadows that stretched endlessly across the plains, carrying the promise of battle, chaos, and challenge. Kale's hand brushed hers, steadying her. "The time has come," he said, voice low but firm. "They seek to challenge the bond, to break it, but we will stand together, always." Ira nodded, feeling the power of the sigil on her wrist pulse in resonance with Kale's own. The bond had grown stronger with every trial, every test, every moment of trust and courage. It was no longer simply a connection. It was a force, living, responsive, and unyielding. The ground trembled as the army drew closer, the sound of their march echoing against the distant hills. Kale's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening with controlled intensity. "They do not understand the power they face," he said. "They think the bond is a weakness. They do not know it is our greatest strength." Ira swallowed hard, but she did not shrink. Fear had been a constant companion until now, but the bond had changed her. She felt her own strength awaken fully, the power flowing through her veins like a river of light and shadow. Ready to meet any threat? Cale's gaze met hers. And for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded, a small but resolute gesture. "I am." The first clash came suddenly. Shadows erupted from the ground as the enemy advanced, dark forms moving unnaturally fast, like the living memory of the night itself. Ira felt her power surge, her hands glowing faintly as she directed the shadows around her. Bending them to protect herself and Cale, the bond responded instinctively, guiding her movements, amplifying her courage, and connecting her directly to Cale's strength. Cale moved beside her, every step precise, every motion powerful. Together, they became a single force of light and shadow, countering the invading army with a grace and ferocity that was almost poetic. Ira could feel his heartbeat in rhythm with hers, their energy flowing as one. The bond a living thing that pulsed with each decision, each motion. Each act of courage, the enemy faltered under their combined power, confusion rippling through their ranks. Ira felt a thrill, but she also felt the weight of responsibility. This was no longer just about survival, it was about proving that the bond was unbreakable, that courage and trust could overcome even the darkest threats. Suddenly a figure separated from the army. Cloaked in shadow, moving with deliberate intent, the rival leader approached, radiating power that seemed to push back the very air. Ira sensed the danger immediately, and Cale's expression hardened. "They are strong," he said quietly, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "But we face it together. Remember the bond. Trust it. Trust me." Ira took a deep breath, letting the energy of the bond flow through her. The sigil glowed brighter, casting light across the misty battlefield. She felt fear rising, but she did not let it control her. The bond had taught her to embrace courage, to act with clarity, and to stand beside Cale as an equal, not as someone protected. The rival leader struck first, sending a wave of darkness toward them. Ira's instincts guided her hands, shaping shadows into barriers, twisting them into forms that met the attack and deflected it. Cale moved with her, guiding the flow of energy, striking with precision and force, a dance of power and trust that left even the shadows in awe. For a long moment, the two forces clashed, light against dark, courage against aggression, bond against threat. Ira could feel the strain in her body, the pull of energy, the weight of responsibility, but also the exhilaration of true power, the joy of standing beside someone she trusted completely. Then, with a sudden coordinated motion, Cale and Ira unleashed their full power. The sigil on her wrist flared brilliantly, and shadows surged around them, forming a protective and striking force that struck at the heart of the enemy leader's magic. The attack sent a shockwave across the battlefield, and the rival army faltered. Unable to maintain cohesion in the face of their combined strength, the leaders stumbled, retreating a few steps, but their eyes burned with determination. Ira felt a surge of energy from the bond, amplifying her courage. "We end this," she said, voice clear and steady. "Together." Cale's hand found hers again, and the energy of the bond flowed freely between them, stronger than it had ever been. In that moment, she understood fully. The bond was not just protection or power. It was connection, trust, courage, and choice, all intertwined. It was the force that had awakened her, that had guided her, that had made her capable of facing even the most terrifying challenges. With a final, unyielding strike, they shattered the enemy leader's hold. Dispersing the shadows and breaking the army's formation, the rival forces retreated, vanishing into the mist. Leaving the battlefield silent, except for the wind and the gentle pulse of the moonlight, Ira sank to her knees briefly, exhausted but triumphant. Cale knelt beside her, his hand steadying her once more. "You have done well," he said, voice low, but filled with pride. "You have embraced the bond, and you have proven your courage. You are more than I could have imagined." Ira looked up at him, her chest heaving, and for the first time she felt not just relief but a deep, abiding connection. The fear that had shadowed her life had transformed into trust, into strength, into something she could not have named before. And in Cale's eyes, she saw recognition, respect, and something softer, warmer, that made her heart flutter. "You were incredible," she whispered, almost afraid to say it aloud. Cale's lips curved into a faint smile, rare and fleeting, yet radiant. "No," he said. "We were incredible. Together, we faced what could have broken us and found strength instead. That is the true power of the bond." The first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a soft golden light across the castle and the battlefield. The mist began to lift, and the kingdom seemed to awaken with them, as if the very land recognized the triumph that had occurred. Shadows receded, the air felt lighter, and the ancient magic of the castle pulsed with quiet approval. Ira stood slowly, hand still in Cale's. "What happens now?" she asked. Cale's gaze swept across the horizon, thoughtful and steady. "Now we rebuild. We strengthen. The bond is no longer just a force of survival. It is a promise, a connection, and a guide. And there will be more challenges. But whatever comes, we face it together. Always." Ira nodded, feeling the weight of the words and the truth they carried. She had been a stranger in the moonlit line, frightened and unsure. Now she stood beside the Alpha King, not as a pawn, not as someone chosen, but as a partner. The bond had awakened her, strengthened her, and made her capable of standing against the darkest forces of their world. Cale lifted his hand, brushing a lock of hair from her face once more. "The world will try to test us, Ira, but it cannot break what we have built. Not fear, not power, not shadows. The bond is stronger than all of that, because it is choice and courage intertwined." Ira smiled faintly, a mixture of relief, pride, and a spark of something tender in her heart. "I understand," she said, "and I choose this bond. I choose us." Cale's eyes softened, darkened, and then shone with a rare warmth. "And I choose you," he said quietly. The words were simple, yet they carried centuries of expectation, pain, triumph, and hope. For a long moment, they stood together, the first rays of sunlight bathing them in gold. The battlefield was quiet now, the shadows retreating, and the kingdom seemed to hold its breath, aware that a new chapter had begun. The bond had not only protected them, and had transformed them, and in the soft light of dawn, Ira realized one undeniable truth. She had not only survived the night, she had embraced her destiny, discovered her strength, and found a connection that would endure beyond the challenges yet to come. The castle hummed with quiet magic. The land responded with gentle acknowledgement, and Cale's hand remained firmly in hers. Steady, unwavering, a promise of trust and partnership. The world was vast, full of shadows and uncertainty. But for the first time, Ira felt ready to face it not alone, but together, bonded by courage, choice, and something far deeper than either of them had imagined. The morning wind carried a hint of possibilities yet unseen, whispering of adventures, challenges, and transformations still to come. And as Ira looked at Cale, she knew that whatever the future held, they would face it as one bound by trust, by courage, and by a love that had been forged in moonlight, tested in shadows, and solidified in the light of their first victory. The bond was complete, and their story, though only beginning, promised a world transformed by strength, trust, and a love that even the shadows could not conquer.